welcome everyone to the second in a series of what we're going to try to do monthly webinars, free webinars, to try and help you get a little bit more out of CareTracker. So today's meeting is on new encounter form maintenance, and we've got several end users, so welcome. Feel free at any point in time to go ahead and unmute your phones and jump in and ask a question. Also, you can use the chat window in GoToMeeting, and you could put your message in there. Now, I'm not going to be monitoring that myself because I can't do two things at once. But Miranda and Tony and Bruce and Cheryl and the rest of the team will be watching that. So if they see something in there, they'll interrupt me and get the question asked. So before I get rolling, I better just double check. Everybody on the Phasis team, are you seeing the screen okay and hearing me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Fantastic. All right. All right, so the first question that you might ask is, how do I move to the next screen? There we go. Is what is an encounter form, right? What are we actually talking about? What is this old and new encounter form, and why do I have to worry about it? So whether you're billing on paper super bills or whether your providers are filling out the electronic visit, the encounter form is the place where you pull together all of the diagnosis and procedure codes and a little bit of additional information about the appointment to put together that information for billing. So if you're creating paper super bills from the encounter form, you have kind of one set of challenges. And if you're not on paper, you can use the new encounter form, or the old encounter form for that matter, and you can leverage it and don't have to be as careful about how it looks on paper. So it's kind of, we want to, as we go through this and as you ask questions, you might just clarify for me when you ask the question whether it's geared more towards paper or more towards electronic. I'll try to answer it both ways, but the answer may vary depending on how you're actually using the encounter form. So what is the difference between the paper encounter form and the electronic encounter form? So on paper, you can kind of leave a little bit to the imagination. We've seen offices that don't want to list a diagnosis code or procedure code for that matter 10 times just because there's 10 different variations and the last digit changes. So what they'll oftentimes do is put in on their paper super bill, they might put in, like for diabetes, they might put in 250 point, and then they just have like XX or a blank, meaning that the doctor, when they take their pen out of their pocket and handwrite on the paper super bill what the diagnosis is, that they're supposed to remember to put in those last two digits. So on paper, you kind of think about how are they going to use it, and you create the different elements of your super bill, your paper super bill, with the fact that it is paper in mind. And so, you know, docs are going to write notes on the paper super bill. They're going to maybe draw lines and things like that. So you kind of can put together your encounter form for a paper-based scenario differently than the electronic. You have to be on paper. You have to be concerned with how does it look when I print it, which means you're going to be paying attention to the size of the font in both the header and the footer as well as the body. You might be concerned with how many columns am I going to have, and it's just a whole bevy of things that might change when you're concerned with getting this printed on a single or two sheets of paper and having the doctor actually be able to read it. You know, I've seen some people that cram a gazillion different elements in, and then the doctor complains that it's as big as a pinhead and I can't see without glasses. Well, you know, one or the other. You either have a big font and fewer items or lots of items and small. When you go electronic, that is off the table because you can just scroll endlessly through the pages. The other thing is on paper, you can use kind of bogus codes. We can pull in things that don't mean anything, and when the provider is getting the paper and they fill it in, they can write whatever they want. Now, when you use invalid codes on the electronic version, drives the builders crazy because it's going to bump up against edits, and so you need to use codes that actually can show up on a claim form and codes that will pass the edits. So we got to do that. So difference between paper and electronic is paper, you got to be concerned with how it looks, but you've got a lot of leeway with what you put in there. Electronic, you don't really care about the layout so much, but you got to pull in things that that are legitimate codes that billers are going to use as well. And so moving from paper to electronic sometimes can be a little bit of a challenge, and I'm not really going into that at all. But if you have, if you're going to move from paper to electronic sometime in 2015, feel free to engage Phasis support, because we've dealt with lots of offices that have done that, and we can kind of look at your existing super bill and help you decide what are the different codes that are going to pose problems and how would you attack that. So paper versus electronic, it's not apples to apples, it's apples and oranges, they're different. And as long as you understand that those differences will have implications in what you build, you should be good to go. So today's webinar is about encounter form maintenance, and we're going to spend the bulk of the meeting in CareTracker actually building a form and looking and seeing how it works. But I wanted you to be aware that the encounter form maintenance, at least on paper, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3, right? 3 steps. Build the new encounter form, which I'm going to show you how to do. Then there's 2 other steps that if you don't do, you're going to be going, hey, great, I built this, but I can't find it, I can't print it, I can't pull it in, I can't use it. So once the encounter form is built and active and you're happy with it, in order to see it in the rest of CareTracker, you need to add it to QuickPicks. We'll show you what that's about today. And you also need to assign it to some type of usage. So you can create defaults. You can have different encounter forms come up based on appointment types, or you can have the different encounter form used or invoked based on a specific provider or a specific location, or even a combination of providers and locations. We'll get into all of that into CareTracker in a minute. All right, so before I jump in and start really dealing with with building the encounter form, I wanted to briefly tell you what I'm going to show you. So we're going to look at defining a layout. There are header and footer considerations. There's number of columns, font size. I mentioned all of that. That all has to do with paper. If you're not in paper, you may not be as concerned with a lot of that, save for the number of columns you might still be concerned about. The encounter form is broken into sections, and within each section there's kind of 2 main categories. One would be procedures, and the other would be diagnoses. And diagnoses with ICD-10 were one of the reasons for this encounter form change at CareTracker, is they had to make changes to accommodate ICD-10, and so they moved from the old encounter form to the new encounter form. And when they were prepared to kind of force everybody to use that last year, and then Congress delayed the implementation of ICD-10, and they gave everybody a reprieve. So we're kind of in this in-between place right now, where old encounter forms still work, and you can still use them, and we, for a few more days, can still edit those for you using the old encounter form editor, but right around the corner, you're going to be locked in. If you have an old encounter form and you want to make a change, then you have to create basically a duplicate new encounter form. And if you don't know how to do that, you're going to be kind of up against the wall using bad forms and things like that. So this webinar is to teach you how to create new encounter forms, because moving forward, that is the only way you're going to make changes to your encounter form. It's going to be create a copy and make changes from there. So we'll show you searching for codes. We'll also show you what is available in there for highlighting, editing. There's cool things like wrapping the text, or in the new Encounter Form Editor, you can insert blank lines, which you weren't able to do previously. Alrighty. And then here are some things we've learned along the way. We'll come back to this slide when I'm done. So let's launch into our training company. And I'm going to go to administration here. And if you go to setup, you're going to see under financial encounter form maintenance. All right, so for those of you that were getting a cup of coffee, let's do it again. Administration, setup, financial encounter form maintenance. And what that will do is launch us into a window, a dialog box that takes a little while to populate, and it's going to have all the active forms that are available to your company. Now, the training group has a gazillion forms because over the years a bunch of people have created stuff. You'll notice that on this, the way that this is set up, we've got the title of the encounter form, whether or not it's active. If I wanted to show inactive ones, I could click the show inactive. What level? So this is it shared across the entire company, or is it shared across my groups? I don't know of anyone on this call when I looked at the roster. Well, no, actually, Stacy, your doctors live in different groups, so you probably would end up wanting to create, if the different offices are just have drastically different encounter forms, you may want to create them at a group level, just so that they don't get mixed in. Or if they're very, very close, you might want to create them at a company level. And there's a neat function over here, which is copy. So the last few things, you can preview the encounter form, and this preview is a paper print preview. Okay, so this would be similar to the paper. It does not preview the visit, but the visit is taken from the paper encounter form. So this function here, copy encounter form, that's really cool. If you've built something, say for maybe new patients have a certain super bill, and you have maybe 150 different codes that you want to use. You might have for follow-up patients a smaller subset or a different subset, but the majority of it is the same, and you don't want to have to rebuild it. So copy is pretty cool. It allows you to create an exact copy of your encounter form. You name it slightly different, and it gives you a head start. Now, unfortunately, there is no function to copy the old encounter form. I'm very sorry. The structure is so different that those, it's another apple and orange comparison. There's no way to copy it or have it migrated or merged. So my recommendation is, if you're going to be building a new encounter form, you might start with your existing encounter form, pull up a preview of it, right-click, print, and now you've got your paper copy that you can work off of. And you probably will just be launching into this new encounter form. So up in the top right here, for those of you that still have that GoToMeeting window, you might move it or collapse it. But there's new encounter form button right here. If I click on that, then I am going to be launched into the encounter form add edit mode. So let me go back to my list here. You'll notice that all of these that don't have the ability to edit or copy are built on the old encounter form. So in the training company, I have one new encounter form, a bunch of old encounter forms, and that's pretty much what I got to work with. So if I wanted to make a change to any of these, let's say this training group, primary care, if I wanted to make a change to that, I would have to go in, print it, and then recreate it from scratch, which is why we're here. So it's going to be a fair amount of work. You don't want to wait till the last minute. However, I will say that once you're billing manager or billing staff, you as a practice manager, whoever, once you know that you've got something, a new encounter form that you have to create, you can kind of attack it in a advanced form, or maybe you just throw a couple hours a week at it, and who knows, in a month you'd have it rebuilt. So I did notice there was something in the chat. Go ahead.
There are a couple of people that want you to walk through that step again, and they want to make sure they write it down.
Sure.
They missed how to get to their encounter form.
Okay, so let's go back to literally square one. You launch in, you're at home. Thank you, Miranda, appreciate that. We go to admin, we go to setup, right? We know the difference between the practice, the clinical, and the setup tabs up here. So admin, setup, over here in financial, which is the middle, encounter form maintenance. That gets us to where we can look at old forms and new forms, and this will allow us to launch in and edit the new forms. So test new encounter form, that's a new form built on the new encounter form, and I can go in and I can edit it. If I were to look down here, the training group primary care, that's the one that we're using mostly in the training company, and you'll look at it and you'll go like, yeah, that looks more like a super bill that I'd use. It's all filled out. That one, can't edit it because it was built on the old editor. So I would want to preview, right-click, print, and now I'm ready to create a new encounter form, which is right up here, new encounter form. So I'm going to, rather than creating a new one, I'm going to jump into the one that's here for our demo, and I'm going to edit it. So I'm clicking on this pen and paper over here that's highlighted. You notice the pen and paper on these is grayed out. Old encounter forms cannot be edited anymore. So I'm going to launch into the one that we're kind of working on. So now what we're looking at is I'm in the actual new encounter form maintenance. And I've got right here, this tab, encounter form maintenance, would bring my list up. Again, I don't want to go back to the list because I want to work in this encounter form that's called new test new encounter form, right? So here's the company that I have this assigned to. When I create it for the first time, I would be able to make that decision on whether I'm at a group or a company level. Once I've created it, I am stuck with it. So fortunately, though, you've got the copy function. So what this is telling us is that the test new encounter form that we're going to look at is built at a company level. It is active so that we can go in and edit it. If it were not active, it would have this. I could still get it, find it from the list by looking at inactives, and I could manage it and change it to active. So this is just a toggle. I have assumed that I'm going to need 3 columns. It says tables, but this is like how many columns do I want for procedures and how many columns do I want for the diagnosis, right? So if we go back and we look at this preview, I've got 1, 2, 3 columns for procedures, 1, 2, 3 columns for diagnoses. This up here, that's the header. This down here, this is the footer. In the middle, this is the body. So if we're going back to editing our encounter form, I have told it I want 3 procedure columns, 3 diagnosis columns, and I have gone with the defaults, which are a 11-point font size. And I've said, you know what, I don't want all these things truncated. If I have a long, long, long explanation for something, I want the system to adjust the width or the height, excuse me, of that field so that I don't get truncated words. So let's go back and look at the document, and I'll show you what I mean by word, by wrapping the text. So let's bring this up. So I didn't have any super long explanations here, but let's say that just to take this this line right here, if that needed more verbiage and it went out past this allocated space, if I had wrap text clicked, it would actually adjust this to a double size field or row and allow that text to wrap in and you can see it all. As opposed to if I do not have wrap text on, it's going to truncate it. And when I get to the end of the space, the rest of the characters just won't show. All right, any questions about the general setup?
Matt, there is one question about when you say don't wait to the last minute, you just mean if they're going to need changes, correct? This isn't necessarily being driven by ICD-10.
Correct. So the last minute would be October 1st, 2015, or the next time you want to make a change to your super bill or your encounter form or your visit, call it what you want. So it's either October 1st when you have to start using ICD-10. By then, you got to make changes because you need to use ICD-10, or when you want to make a change. So let's say you've got an item, there's a new code for 2015. You want that CPT code on your encounter form. You can't edit the old form. So that would mean you'd be needing the new form pretty much right then. Could you live without it? Could you have billers search for things? Could you have doctors write billing notes? Yeah, there's workarounds and ways to put that off. But sooner or later, you're going to end up either hitting October 1st or realizing that you needed to make a change. And so that's what's driving that timing. Great question. Anything else, Miranda? She might be muted.
No.
Great. Okay. So let's carry on. That was the general setup was right here, right? And that talked about our whether it's active, how many columns for both procedures and diagnoses. That could be different. If you've got a ton of diagnoses to put on your form, you might use 2, 3, 4, and if you have very few procedures, you might have 1 or 2 columns or something like that. But you can adjust that. And then, of course, header, and this would just be the title of your form. So if you needed to change it, you could actually do that. But let's go in and actually work with the sections, because this is where the real building comes into effect. So you can put your own company name, and you've got 2 address lines to work with. You can have that look however you want. You've got whatever phone number you want to put on your encounter form and fax number. Now, if you've got a bunch of different groups, that might be useful. If you're giving your patients a copy of the super bill, that might be useful. If you're using the electronic visit, some of this may be irrelevant because you may never print a paper form, and none of this will show on the electronic visit. Also, this header and footer having only to do with paper allows you to put a handful of data elements, everything listed here from chart number to cert number, insurance, and all that. That allows you to display it or not on the header or the footer. Now, keep in mind, you could get really kind of crazy with this, and you could have everything show in both the header and the footer, or you could say no to everything and it wouldn't show on anything. So again, if you look at a preview, you must save it. It does a really good job. One of the things we'll point out is that it needs to be saved often. You can't preview it without saving it, which is a good thing. But let's go ahead and look at what this header and footer text is going to look like, right? So it's the header's up here, and whether if I include it, it's going to show up here. And down here is the footer. If I include it, it's going to show up. And it's got a fixed place. It's not like you can say, I like having the payer on here, but I want the payer over on the right side. I'm really sorry. That's not the functionality, but you can at least move it from top to bottom and decide whether or not you want to include it at all. Okay, so let's go and let's play a little bit with a procedure group and a procedure, some of the line items. So you'll notice I've got a couple of scroll bars over here. This is the first procedure group, happens to be the first column, and it happens to be on top. And then below it, I've got what's in column 1 that's in the second order. And then if I keep scrolling down, you'll notice this bar is scrolling over here. If I keep scrolling down, I'm getting more categories, right? I get to the bottom. That's all the categories that are in that right now. If I wanted to delete a category, each category has the ability to be deleted by itself. If I wanted to add a category, come all the way down to the bottom down here, and this is where you'd add a new procedure category. So let's go ahead and add one. And I need to either use an existing name. that I've created, or I need to create a new name. So maybe usually when you're dealing with procedures, you might have like injections or office visit or anything like that that's kind of a header, so that a doc can look at the heading and decide whether it's worth searching in that group for the code they want. But you can put whatever you want. It's free-form text. So once I save this, now that's going to be in the list. At least the next time I come in. It's a refresh issue, but it's there. I'm using it right now. If I go out and come in, if I save it, I'll have miscellaneous procedures in the list. Now I can decide which column I want it to be. I'm going to move this over to the third column, and I'm going to have it be the second thing that shows. Right? And this is where I would insert CPT codes. But let's just simply save it at this point. Thank you. It's been data has been saved successfully. I want to point out that, and we'll cover this in the little learnings and teachings, but as I'm delivering this webinar today, the general release that you're all using, this will not work in IE 11 unless you turn on Compat View, but it would work in IE 10 and 9 and everything else. Tonight, CareTracker is deploying 8.2, which is the same thing that you would see in rapid release, and in rapid release, IE 11 works. So if y'all just give it a day, it should not matter what Internet Explorer you're using. You should be able to turn Compat View off, jump in, and be able to work with this. So if you get an error at this point, it has to do with your browser.
Matt, just for clarification, 8.2 will be released for Thursday night for Friday, is that correct, and not tonight?
I'm sorry, I was thinking I'm wishing time away. Yes, Thursday night. Thank you for clarification. Absolutely. Alrighty, and it looks like, I didn't put anything in it, so let's pop something into the bottom. That was totally interesting. And Bruce, speak up if there's something here. So miscellaneous procedures, let's search for a procedure. I just put in a 1.1, so this is where I'm going to go in and I'm going to search for my different CPT or HCPCS codes. When you find it, when you search for it, you can search just like everything else. I can search by the number. I can search by keyword. Don't let this NDC code give you false hope. You still can't pull NDC codes into the Superbill. Hopefully down the road, but not quite yet. So I'm going to go ahead and pick this debridement, and I'm going to, I've got the ability, if I wanted to apply some formatting. Now, I haven't seen that the highlighting is working yet, but I do know that the italic and the bold both work. So I'm going to take this debridement, and I'm also going to say, you know what, my doctor doesn't know what that is. I'm just going to, because we call it something else. So let's call it debridement or webinar. That's what the doc calls it. And I'm going to go ahead and then save this. All right.
Hey, Matt, this is Bruce. The highlighting was showing up on my preview.
Oh, was it?
I didn't know.
Okay. That's awesome. So now if I do a preview here, let's see if I get it or not. There it is. So here's my miscellaneous procedures. I added it in column 3, the second thing in the second order. So it was the second one down, and here's my bold and italicized. Let's see what happens. Let's try this. Let's give it a...
Yeah, you have some on there that already highlighted.
Oh, nice. Okay. So it might just be, so where's the, oh, okay. You know what, I was expecting the highlight to be a little more to it. So there it is. It's highlighted. Okay. Kind of fill it in. So that was creating procedure groups and populating this. Now let's say that there's something on here that I want to get rid of. Or maybe I've got, in here I've got like a whole bunch. Don't forget to scroll down within here. It gets a little tight. So you want to have a good layout. Here's an example of a blank line right here, and that would be coming from adding this. I can add things and I can subtract things from my different categories. So let's do two things. Let's delete this procedure category, or the one that I created for the webinar. Let's delete this guy. Delete the entire category. Bingo. And on this one, let's delete the critical care first hour. Bingo. And then I'll save it. Thank you. And then if I go preview it, I'm going to notice my whole entire section is gone. Right? I used to be 3 columns, but I got rid of the only middle column, so now it's just self-adjusting to 2 columns. So let's go in and let's say, all right, let's move. See if I can move this miscellaneous 3. No, I've deleted it. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to leave it at that. So my suggestion here is go in, play with it. Feel free to jump into the training group and play with it. You don't have to work in your company, or if you just work in your company, you can create an encounter form that you never intend on using and inactivate it. So diagnosis grouping is pretty much exactly the same thing, with the exception of the data that you're pulling in is different. So procedures, HCPCS codes, there's not a tree effect yet, but when we're searching for diagnosis codes, and I'm going to go ahead and just search within this category, and let's do this, and let's search. So here I searched based on keyword for diabetes, right, and I could pick any one of these. Now, you can't put in a folder level, or can I? No, it didn't put in the folder. All it did is collapse it. So you need to get to a data item that doesn't have a folder next to it. So let's just pull in this one, renal manifestations type 2. There it is, right here. I could change the description if I needed to, and away we go. I'm going to go ahead and save that. I want to show you what would happen if you search for, let's go to diabetes. Let's put in, instead of ICD-9, let's search for ICD-10 code. Right, so when you're building your encounter form, you have the benefit of this tree to help you figure out what is it that I need to pull in. Right, and I think the teaching is going to be for docs using paper. You might have to build a whole lot or get tricky with how you create put in a blank line and give it a description with your tell me the last 2 digits, etc. But if you are on the actual visit, the docs, you may not even put in more than just 1, because they'll get an idea of where the code is. When they launch in to search, they'll be having this tree available to them. So that new tree plays well with the IMO diagnosis codes, and gives you a lot of EMR functionality. So that's another reason for this new encounter form change, is they've changed the way the diagnosis codes are searched for by providers and the way they're pulled into the visit and the encounter. So a lot of this was just necessitated.
Matt?
Yes, sir.
Matt? This is Bruce. Yeah, one nice thing about this editor is if you need to move them around, you can just click and drag, instead of before you had to put in like order numbers. And then if you needed to add one to the middle, you had to change the order numbers of everything after that. And
okay.
So if you want to move one of those codes down or one of those codes up, just click and drag on the code.
Thank you. So there you go. I just moved that from the top to the bottom. Excellent. Thank you, Bruce. This one, click on it, put it down. There you go. Now, I can't, unfortunately, move it over here, right? I can't move it outside of the box. So you're stuck with what's inside of this little category. In this case, it's a diagnosis category, but within, assuming you're dealing within, it is nice. You can kind of, what you see is what you get a little bit. Thank you, Bruce. That was awesome. Sure. All right. So that is really how you build them. Let's see if there's any questions about formatting, building, before I move into what you need to do to deploy this to your group. Any questions in the queue, Miranda?
There aren't any in the queue, but I don't know if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question up to this point.
Any takers? All right, that's good. I think everybody's actually looking online shopping, trying to get the last thing done, and they have me up on the audio. That's what I'd be doing. Okay, so let's move to how do I deploy this to the group. I built it. I'm happy with it. I preview it. It looks fine. It doesn't matter at this point whether it's paper or electronic. I now need to get this disseminated so that when my providers are seeing patients and they're trying to tell the billing department what to bill out, they either have their paper or their electronic visit available to them. So the first thing you need to do is go to Administration, Setup again. So we're almost in the same place. I'm going to skip Encounter Form Maintenance. We're already done with that. And I'm going to come down to Quick Picks. Same section, right below it. Quick Picks right here. So if anyone on this call is not familiar with Quick Picks, there's a whole training session on that. But basically, anytime you're in Care Tracker, whether it's the practice management or the EMR, and you've got these little pull-down items like this, they're going to be controlled by either creating favorites and things like that, which is more of an EMR function, or by putting them into a quick picks list, and that is the practice management functionality. So I'm in Administration, Setup, Quick Picks, and now I need to deal with my encounter form. So if you're looking for something that says encounter form, you won't find it. You'll see encounter diagnoses, and you'll see encounter procedures. These were built for offices that neither wanted to use the full-blown visit functionality nor the paper superbill, and you could just put lists of diagnosis codes and procedure codes that when the doctor clicks into the visit are there for him to grab, kind of like favorites. That is functionality that has been eclipsed by the new encounter form and the old encounter form maintenance when you get to a practice that's going to use more than just 5, 6, 7, a dozen codes at the most. So that's great thinking if literally everything you do all day long is one of 5 codes and one of 4 diagnoses. Great, knock yourself out. Otherwise, you're going to want to build the encounter form. That's your keyword, encounter form. So on form letters, if I click here, I need to search for and pull in the encounter form. So this is that test new encounter form, right? I'll delete it out just so I can show you how I would search for it. All right, close. So let's search for test and see what is out there in the world of forms called test.
A lot.
Gotta wait for it, right, Bruce?
Yeah, there's a lot that start test.
Right, and this is, so test, this was just what was in there, right? Test encounter form, I don't see it. Kind of wishing I wouldn't have saved it, deleted it now. There we go.
There you go.
It didn't wait long enough. All right, so test encounter form. You see it?
Test new. Lowercase test. Let's see. Keep going. Maybe I'll give it more, but it should be in there. It's a lowercase test, right?
Yeah, I was looking for it. There we go. So I find it. Okay. I click on it. It pulls it in. Tells me it's been on the list, and guess what? It is back on my list at the bottom, right? So as you add them, they just go to the bottom of the list. Does this have the ability to move them? No, it doesn't. All right, so now I've got it back on the list. So I built a form. I put it into the quick picks for form letters so that I'll see it in the rest of Care Tracker. So now we're halfway there. Built a form. I've got it in quick picks so I can find it. I can now pull it in. So now we get to where you have basically 3 choices on how to deploy this. Choice number 1 it's the only thing we're going to use for anybody ever. It's the only visit encounter form or super bill, call it what you want, that I'm going to use. At that point, if that's the case, simplest way is to just have us add it as the default encounter form. Then no matter where you are, anytime you bring up a visit or an encounter form, you'll get the default encounter form. If, on the other hand, you want to be able to have one visit depending on an appointment type or a doctor or a location, then you need to decide how specific do I want to get. So if I'm going to have every doctor has maybe their own encounter form and they'll either use it in the office, they may have a second one at the hospital, things like that, then you could get away with what's called encounter form setup. So if I go to admin and I go to setup and I look for, where is it? Encounter form setup right here. So it's under the scheduling, right? So it's in that same column, but it's down here. Encounter form setup. This is going to allow me to, if I want to add a new setup, then it's going to allow me to pick, first of all, which form, and it's what I put in the quick picks is what I'm getting here. And then here's my resource, aka doctor, aka provider. So if I wanted all of Dr. Burroughs when he is in the office to be this test new encounter form, so I can now create scenarios. Every time Dr. Burroughs asks for a supervill, if he's at the office, he'll get whatever's on this line, and if he's at St. Luke's, he's going to get that line. Now you can't edit these. All you can do is create new ones. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that hospital one. And let's do a Dr. Burroughs different encounter form. So when he's at the hospital, he wants to do this one. So Dr. Burroughs, and now I'm like, if I'm at the hospital, save that. So now anytime Dr. Burroughs is trying to create a super bill and he's in an encounter or an appointment where he's the resource and the location is hospital, and this is not like place of service, this is literally there's a location called hospital, then that super bill would come up. So just a real quick thing about the default. If I have a default encounter form applied, if Dr. Burroughs were to be in the office, he would get this encounter form. If Dr. Burroughs were in an encounter related to the hospital location, he'd get this line right here. But if he were in a location other than these two, he would get the default encounter form. All right. So that's a way where you can create encounter forms, apply them to doctors and locations. The standard, the way that most,
Matt,
yes.
You have a question. Danielle was asking if you would be able to go over how to get to this page again because she missed the very beginning.
You bet. Yep. So it's a recurring theme, right? Everything we've done in here has been administration, setup, right? My encounter form maintenance was here. Quick picks are here. Encounter form setup is here. The third area is related to appointment type. So everything we're doing is admin, setup, and it's right in this middle column right here. So appointment types. This is the other place where we can assign an encounter form. So the idea behind this appointment type is now it's not so much about my doctor and where he is, but it's about the patient. You can still pull in location, you can still pull in doctor and things like that to define an appointment type and things like that. But if I get to the level where everyone that comes in that has a follow-up visit, I don't care which doctor they are, they're going to use a specific encounter form, then that's where you could use this. So I was admin, setup, down in scheduling, appointment types, and now I'm editing an appointment type. I could add a new one, but really all we want to do is apply the encounter form to your existing appointments. We're not trying to get fancy and create a bunch of new appointments. So I'll go back to this follow-up. This is where I can pull in the encounter form, right? Once again, if it's in the quick picks list, I'll see it. And if it is a global encounter form, I'll see it this way. So there's a bunch of globals that have been created so that you'll see it. And then anything I put on my quick picks will also be there, right? So I could change it from the global primary to that test new encounter form if I wanted to, but I don't want to. Just FYI, this is also the same place where you can change the name of the short, apply a short name to the appointment type, in addition to defining what encounter form I want to use. I can define what type of encounter. This has to do entirely with the electronic medical record, not practice management, but it's also a place where I can come in and I can apply different border. And then I've got templates for the EMR that I could pull in anytime this appointment's used. I've also got, is this transition of care? This has to do with meaningful use, yes or no. Don't pay attention to this down here. Since you've opted for using the full encounter form, you're not using procedure and diagnoses to pull into it. However, medications and letters, you do have the ability to tie those in, make it a little more convenient to use with the appointment. But for this webinar, I'm talking about the encounter form, tying it to an appointment type. All right, so once I've done that, then what will happen is if I'm out on the schedule, say, and I wanted to, in our training database, we have created appointment-based encounter form decisions. So for Larry Test, who's on here, if I wanted to look at the encounter form, and I always take too long. Here we go. This is the paper encounter form. Did I get there in time? Yep, I've got to wait for it. Everything slows down on GoToMeeting. So there we go. That was a way to print that. So basically, we said we want the new encounter form tied to this anything visit. Now, differently, we said if it's a civil service appointment, like this one up here, then I want to use a different encounter form. So here we are. This is the bigger, badder encounter form, right? So I've just told the system which encounter form to use for which appointment type. And of course, that flows through. If I go to clinical today, that same information, if I decided to do it by appointment type, then the system's going to look at the appointment type and pull the appropriate visit. Or if I didn't define it at appointment type level, it would look at my resource and my location and decide which one to use. But if I just go up here to the visit, this is the longer form, right? And here's my 3 pages, the procedures, the diagnosis, the visit summary. If I go to Test Larry and decide, oops, I didn't need to do that, and look at his visit here, this is going to be the shorter new encounter form that we created because he had a different appointment type and it asked for a different encounter form. Okay, that's how you deploy the encounter forms that you make. So let me switch back to this. Let's talk about some things that we've learned along the way, and then I'll open it up to questions. And let's see, do you have to go to appointment type when only one encounter form is used for all visits? No. So that question would be if you have only one encounter form for everything in the practice, then just create a default encounter form and you're done. But let's say you do that, then all of a sudden down the road, your doctor says, hey, when I do this procedure here, it's only 5 codes. I don't want to look through everything. You could suddenly go out, create a new form, and apply that one form that you created to the one scenario where it would be used. And when you get in that scenario based on provider, appointment type, or location, or any combination of those 3, that specific encounter form will come up. For all other cases, the default encounter form is what will be used. All right, so here's some of the things we've learned along the way, and this is Bruce makes this picture look calm when he's had to build some encounter forms. So number 1 is if you want a specific form to be a default encounter form, you need to let us know, because right now in all of your companies we have the old encounter form that was originally created. So if you go through and you build all this work and you tie it around and you've thought of 9 out of 10 scenarios and the new encounter form pops up, 1 out of 10 scenarios you didn't think of, guess what's going to pop up? The old encounter form, because that's what's in default. So number 1, if you have a new encounter form you want set as the default, send it to support. Let us know the name of the encounter form, and we will add it as your default encounter form. When we were looking at the sections, you notice that you can move line items around. You can apply different formatting to different line items. You can change the order. I can even move a section to a different column in a different sequence. However, what I cannot do is if I took a bunch of time building a section and I had 20 different codes and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I want these in another section, I can't just copy and paste. So be deliberate, think it out before you go in there and start clicking around and adding things, because that one particular thing is very unforgiving. You'll spend a lot of time recreating work you've already done if you don't lay it out in advance and think about it. The encounter form maintenance is kind of like the document module, where it just pulls a lot of bandwidth to do what it needs to do. And there will be times when you'll get bumped when you're doing something. There'll be times when you think you saved something and you didn't. So treat this, wow, how'd that happen? Let me go back up if I can. So treat this like the old XT, what was the original Windows that came up in the original computers? I'm thinking back 25 years ago, where if you didn't save your work every 2 minutes, you might lose it. It's not quite that bad, but my suggestion is whenever you've done enough work where you're like, I'd be really bummed if I lost that, hit the save button. It just takes a second, and then you're golden. Compatibility view, currently giving us fits, depending on whether you're in IE11, you got to toggle in, you toggle out. Once you find the right setting, you're good. So it might take you 5 minutes to get started. I am extremely hopeful that as of Friday morning, as long as you clear your cache, you're going to be able to go in and successfully navigate this and not have to trigger compatibility view. But like all things Care Tracker, the first thing you ought to try when things don't look right is compatibility view. Just toggle. See if that takes care of it. So remember to leave that in your toolbox for things to do if you run into trouble. There are also new encounter form webinars. The old style where you have a trainer directly from Optum who's going to go over kind of a little differently than I did. They're going to start from ground zero and walk you through how to build it. If you've gone through this and your head's spinning, you get in, you try to do it, and you're like, what is going on? You can call support. We'll give you one-on-one training. You can attend the webinar. You can also look at the help documentation. There's not a lot. I'm going to send out the help documentation after this call, and it'll be on the website as well if you can't figure out where to do it. The other thing that is an option for you is you may just say, you know what, I just want you guys to do it. So there is the option to just send us a copy of how you want it to look, and we'll recreate it for you. So with that, I've come to the end of my structured demonstration and webinar. What questions might you all have? Feel free to unmute, and let's see if there's any others to address. Wow. That means I must have explained it. So Melissa, did you get that? Okay, you had a question in the chat from quite some time ago about going through it again. Are you clear? Everything's good?
I am clear. I just asked Miranda if we could just get it. She said everybody's going to get this through the email, so I'm good, Matt.
Okay. Yep. So yeah, what I'm sending out will be this. Let me show you the. You'll see it. I would probably mess something up. So it's just the help documentation that exists from Care Tracker. It's typical Care Tracker, right? Sometimes they define. The answer is just like the question restated. What do I put in encounter form type? Put in the encounter form type you want to use. Yeah, stuff like that. So feel free to send your questions to us to support, to answer, attend one of the webinars, and don't forget to use help. It's really not rocket science, but it is something that's tedious, and you want to kind of be ahead of the curve and think about. Any other questions? Nope. Going once? Going twice? Okay. Please let us know how we can help you. And thank you very much for your participation in January. What's our webinar going to be in January, Miranda?
The new training module.
Mazinga. Yeah. All right. So looking forward to seeing everybody again in January. Happy holidays if we don't talk to you before then. And thank you very much for participating. We appreciate it.